In this video I will further defend the epistemological argument I made in Why Religious Apologists Cannot Possibly Win Part 1. I am going to refute the counter-argument that Occam's razor would favor the divine revelation explanation over my hypothetical alien deception explanation. So the claim is essentially that the notion of alien deception would be an ad hoc explanation relying on extra and unjustified assumptions. In other words, I will demonstrate in this video why exactly it is the divine revelation hypothesis which is more ad hoc and relies on a far greater amount of extra and unjustified assumptions. First of all, let's try to figure out what extra assumptions the theist could argue we need to make in order to say that the alien explanation is more likely than the divine revelation explanation. Judging from the comments I got on my previous video, it seems like the argument is that the alien deception hypothesis is essentially a simulation of divine revelation set in contrast to actual divine revelation, meaning that the alien deception hypothesis is adding in an extra assumption to the divine revelation hypothesis. It would be something like seeing a smashed car standing next to a tree and then be presented by two hypotheses. The car crashed into the tree, or a witch made it appear that the car crashed into a tree, when it actually didn't. The second one is basically a simulation of the first one and adds in the extra assumption of it being an illusion. And if the alien deception hypothesis is indeed like this, then Occam's razor would favor the divine revelation hypothesis, since the alien deception hypothesis would then add at least one extra and unnecessary assumption. But this is an extreme oversimplification of the issue, since it leaves out tons of contributing factors that need to be taken into account as well. When trying to establish what explanation serves as the best explanation, one needs to take into account all contributing factors of the explanations themselves and how they relate to the actual data that is to be explained. So let's first take a look at what data actually requires an explanation and what would be the bare minimum of attributes that the cause of this data would require to serve as a plausible candidate for the actual cause of the events in question. The actual data that would be present if the biblical history in fact occurred, and the facts that the Bible would contain if it both showed descriptions of future events and scientific knowledge that would be discovered by humans way after the Bible was written, would be something as follows. Let's take the miracle of the parting of the Red Sea as an example. What would be the required attributes of the cause of such an event? Well, it would have to have the ability to manipulate the water molecules of the Red Sea, to make them move about in a way contrary to how they would normally move about, to command this process at the right moment, and to remain not directly observable to the people involved. These are pretty much the only necessary requirements for the cause of the parting of the Red Sea. The cause needs to be able to affect the water in a way beyond human capabilities, it most likely requires intelligence since it shows intent, and it has to be invisible to the people involved. So the cause is most likely some superhuman intelligence. But can we deduce more attributes than those from this event? No, we cannot. We don't know how this event was caused, we can't know the nature of the cause, nor its number, nor its whereabouts, nor specific details about its intent. Now the divine revelation hypothesis tries to explain this event as a supernatural intervention by God. Now it's not difficult to see how this explanation adds in lots of unnecessary attributes which are not required to explain the given data. Which would be something like this. The ability to do all things logically possible, in other words omnipotence. To manipulate matter by supernatural means. The cause being itself a supernatural entity. A way the omniscient creator of the universe would choose to reveal himself by. The parting of the Red Sea is not a display of omnipotence, since merely manipulating water molecules is not something that could only be done by an omnipotent being. There is also no requirement for the cause being supernatural or acting through supernatural means. We humans with our limited technology are already capable of manipulating matter. The display of parting the Red Sea is merely an increase of scale. It's very plausible given what we know about the advances of science, especially quantum mechanics, that superior technology would be capable of parting a large body of water. So assuming that the cause of the parting of the Red Sea was both a supernatural and an omnipotent agent is a huge addition of unnecessary assumptions, unwarranted by the actual data we are presented with. Now we could exchange the parting of the Red Sea with any other wondrous event in the Bible, but we would have to come to the same conclusions. Both supernatural and omnipotent intervention are extra unnecessary assumptions unwarranted by the actual data involved. All that we can assume the cause to be is some agent or agents with abilities of manipulating matter beyond current human capabilities, being unknown in nature, number, whereabouts, current involvement, extent of the involvement and specific intents. What about scientific foreknowledge? This one is even worse for the divine revelation hypothesis, since these supposed facts don't even require superhuman intelligence. After all the supposed facts are things that we discovered either recently or even centuries ago. So here's some of the unnecessary and unwarranted extra assumptions are as follows. The cause is all-knowing, in other words omniscient. A supernatural agent, the creator of the universe, and revealing these facts are a way the omniscient creator of the universe would choose to reveal himself by. Even if he would say that more than 21st century human knowledge would be required, even 10 times as much understanding, then omniscience would still be a huge unnecessary assumption, unjustified given the data that is to be explained. Also, none of the supposed scientific facts in the Bible require the cause to be a supernatural agent. Now, prophecy would be the best shot the religious apologists would have at divine revelation. But even prophecy doesn't necessarily require actual knowledge of the future, nor does it require knowledge of all facts altogether. And neither does it imply the cause to be the creator of the universe, nor a supernatural agent. Now it might be that this would be a way for the omniscient creator of the universe to make himself known, but it is still an assumption that specifically the biblical prophecies would be that way, and that he would choose events that would be easy to duplicate by either time traveling or manipulation of events. So the divine revelation hypothesis actually depends on a huge amount of extra unnecessary assumptions that cannot be deduced from the actual data in question. And those are exactly the kind of assumptions that the concept of Occam's razor is meant to shave away. But more than that, the alien deception hypothesis wasn't meant as an illusion of divine revelation in the first place. There is a profound difference between creating the illusion of divine revelation and falsely ascribing divine revelation to something. And this distinction might not be that obvious on the surface of it. Since we are talking about aliens anyway, let's explain this by using aliens as an example. Here we have some evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Well, not really of course. But there are people who believe crop circles were the result of alien beings. Now we actually know how crop circles are made in almost all cases, but let's say that we didn't know how they were made. Would that make them evidence of aliens visiting Earth? No, it wouldn't. But let's say we had two hypotheses. The first is that aliens did it, the second is that humans masquerading as aliens did these. Now if you would apply Occam's razor to this issue, we would have to favor the alien explanation because the human deception explanation adds an extra assumption. Namely, it takes the alien explanation but adds the assumption of deception to it, right? Well, not at all. Even disregarding the fact that by no means aliens, spaceships or even advanced technology are required to make these circles, and therefore nothing at all suggests alien involvement, the problem that I am concerned with here is the following. Would we even suspect this to be something that aliens would come here to do? Is it to be suspected that alien beings capable of space travel, perhaps thousands of years more advanced to us, would fly thousands or millions of light years to our planet, mow down some weed and then go back home again? Well, sure, it's possible, but not very plausible, now is it? So is this really an illusion or simulation of alien involvement? Or is it an act with no plausible relation to what aliens might come to do on another planet, that is falsely ascribed to aliens? The actual illusion here is that this would be something to be expected of highly advanced extraterrestrial beings. And the same goes for the divine revelation hypothesis when it comes to religion. I would argue that people stating that the events in Christianity or any other religion would be evidence of divine revelation are in the same position as people who claim that crop circles would be evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Both are making a huge assumption that this is something that is to be expected of the beings they suggest are causing these events. As I said at the end of my Why Religious Apologists Cannot Possibly Win video, we wouldn't be justified to believe the alien deception hypothesis either without evidence that specifically alien beings are behind the unexplained events. But at the very least, aliens would fit better in the whole picture than actual revelation of the omniscient and omnipotent creator of the universe. Especially in light of the fact that the alien deception hypothesis relies on fewer unnecessary assumptions. After all, aliens would be the kind of beings who would be able to do all of the things in the Bible, but without adding in the unnecessary attributes of being supernatural, omnipotent, omniscient, the creator of the universe, etc. They are the type of beings that come closest to the bare minimum requirements of what the cause of these events would be, and therefore are favored by Occam's razor. And whether or not God actually exists is irrelevant to the matter as well, as I argued in the original video. After all, the existence of aliens is already extremely likely in the theistic worldview, and moreover, the existence of aliens being likely doesn't make it more likely that they would be behind crop circles, because their mere existence doesn't connect them to mowing down weed in abstract art forms. The explanation of divine revelation doesn't merely assume a being whose exclusive characteristics aren't remotely required to explain the given data, but it's also based on the assumption that not only would such a being want to reveal itself, but it would in fact reveal itself by causing such events as described in the Bible or any other holy book. So those are pretty huge extra and unnecessary assumptions that the divine revelation hypothesis is making. So Occam's razor would by no means favor such an explanation. Now it is argued that God's immanence is actually very likely in light of natural theology, but this topic will be addressed in a future video. In the end, Occam's razor is only applicable to two competing hypotheses which are equal in other respects, which the divine revelation hypothesis and the alien deception hypothesis are not to begin with. But even if they were, the divine revelation hypothesis depends on more extra unnecessary assumptions than the alien deception hypothesis. But even the alien deception hypothesis would rely on unjustified assumptions. That's why I said that we cannot assume alien involvement either without actual evidence that it are aliens who are causing the unexplained events. When we have no reliable evidence to discern what is causing these strange events, we would simply have to conclude that the events are just that, unexplained. Without reliable evidence, whatever the cause would be of the biblical events would remain unknown in its nature, whereabouts, level of involvement, duration of its involvement, and specific intent. And one should also take into account that Occam's razor is a useful tool when judging explanations, but it's not a magic word that will prove your explanation correct. After all, Occam's razor is very difficult to apply where you're not aware of all contributing factors required to discern which explanation makes the fewer extra assumptions. So if you are really saying that Occam's razor would either be the only way or the main way to actually discern whether the biblical events are the result of God's revelation or not, then your explanation really is balancing on the razor's edge.